Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the intersection of cannabis, the capital markets, and culture. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg of KCSA Strategic Communications speak with the business leaders, financial experts, cultural icons, legislators, and generally interesting people moving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Louis and Ann speak with Dr. Bill Levine, founder and chief science officer of CannRx, a biotech company that develops proprietary, scientifically based medical and adult use cannabis products that have consistent therapeutic effects. Dr. Levine is a highly sought out speaker and resource for the cannabis industry, and he was just named Cannabis and Tech Today's Innovator of the Year for 2019. The guy has some serious cred. So don't sit back, lean forward. Now on to our conversation with Dr. Bill Levine of CanRx.
Hey, Ann, how are you?
Hey, Louis. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. It's not our normal recording day. We usually record on Fridays.
I know. I kind of want to go home after this. It's my usual schedule.
I would also like to go home after this. I'm actually playing pickleball tonight, so that's
oh,
my...
really? That's such a big thing out here, too. I haven't played it yet.
It is. It's like standing on a ping pong table and whacking the shit out of the ball and just having a lot of fun. Yeah, totally. Melissa got me into it. She's been playing now for months, and I've been playing for a couple of months, and it has become my favorite physical activity.
Seems like a good outlet for aggression.
It is, because it's a wiffle ball, and no matter how hard you hit it, you can't hit it that hard.
Well, don't hurt yourself, please.
Oh, I'm sure I'll figure out a way to do that. I can hurt myself frickin', opening up a seltzer bottle. We just did a really interesting podcast with Bill Levine from CannRx. We've been working with Israeli companies at KCSA for decades, literally decades. And they are all staffed by some of the smartest, most creative people in the world. And this is another one of those companies. I love them. They're a challenge to work with at times. CannRx has not been, but Israeli companies can be a challenge. And this is I found the conversation to be fascinating.
I think, I love the talk of the science behind it. And I definitely am going to go down some Google rabbit holes, just on some of the stuff that he talked about. And I'd love to have him back because I think there's so much missing when it comes to the, what's proven and what's not proven. What are we calling snake oil? What are we not calling snake oil? And I think that's just the fascinating side of it. And I think the only way, for this, industry to move forward is with more study, more data, and more application. So I love these kind of conversations.
And that's why I think what's happening in Israel is so interesting, because it's legal there for medicinal use.
I think Louis needs some. He's still coughing.
It hasn't gone away. But, because it's legal there for medicinal use, they're able to do real clinical trials. And that is what the industry really needs. Everybody is so focused on the adult use market, but the medical market is still massively underdeveloped. There's huge opportunity, and as much as everybody is so happy and excited about being able to walk into a dispensary to buy cannabis legally, the roots of this industry were medical, and it got passed from a medical perspective for a reason. It wasn't about getting high, it was about getting well. And the wellness part of this industry is really being researched most in Israel.
Yeah. So I think you guys are going to really like this episode. It's very cool.
Cool. All right. Shay, roll that tape.
You're a dork.
Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Before we jump into all the stuff about your company, I have to ask, how does a periodontist become a cannabis entrepreneur and somebody who wins Cannabis and Technology Today's Innovator of the Year for 2019?
Well, that actually is a very good question. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to the program. It's an honor to be interviewed by you. It is an interesting question, and I'll give you the short version of the story. Really, is that the way we treat periodontal, I'm a periodontist by training, so we specialize in inflammation and gum infection, and basically the solutions that were being given by the practitioners really were not meeting the needs of the patients and the consumers. And there was nothing in the industry pipeline that was going to be able to provide that solution to the best of my knowledge. So we ended up we got together a small group of creative individuals, and we looked at completely out of the box for potential solutions. And we ended up sort of looking in the botanical world and plant source material, looking for bioactive or pharmaceutically active compounds. And we ended up basically developing a platform of botanical products that can actually reduce the inflammation and enhance the repair of tissue. And that enabled us to control the periodontal disease. So we've developed an array of products, a rinse, a topical patch, which is very interesting because it only adheres when wet as opposed to when dry. Excuse me. And when we understood what we had accomplished here, we basically, the knowledge, the know-how, and the intellectual property that we had created, we actually became a company that specializes in botanical medicine. So we took our knowledge base from dentistry, we went into chronic wound care, women's health care, oncology support, and some other interesting healthcare areas where we felt that we could utilize our understanding of plant material, how we break it apart, how we put it back together to optimize its therapeutic benefit and understand its biologic mechanism of action to create better healthcare products. So when we realized that we were looking at cannabis as a highly pharmacologically active plant material, and if you look at the data that exists in the cannabis area, which is that it's not just active in getting high, it's active in a broad range of high need areas, which include diabetes. It has good data on, it seems to have some data and potential impact on the dementia type diseases, Alzheimer's and others. There's good data on glaucoma, and clearly data on pain and sleep. So,
and anti-inflammation as well, right? I mean, there are. I mean, and I would assume from a periodontal perspective, that's what you were looking at, right? It's like it is a disease of inflammation of the gums, and it's like, okay, what else is there?
So, interestingly enough, though, the inflammatory data that we have is interestingly, there's a lot of talk about it, but the data is all in the non-clinical stages. Okay.
Yeah.
So I like that. I believe it's true. From a mechanism of action standpoint, it makes sense. But in the end, you have to prove that in the complex system of the human body, it still holds true.
You're an Israeli company, and we're going to get into that. The U.S. can't do right now clinical research on cannabis. It's a a Schedule I federal illegal substance, but Israel, it's not. And there is a lot of research going on, whether it be at Hadassah Hospital or at the Technion, all over the country. Can you talk a little bit about the research that your company CannRx is doing? And I know I'm jumping ahead, but you opened the door and I got to walk through it.
No problem. I'm always happy to be an open door policy. So basically, you're right. The Israeli government is much more supportive of the cannabis research industry than the United States government. I do believe that will change with time, but there are trials going on here, and we are actually running some trials here as well. In addition to that, though, one of the problems you have when you're in a small country and you're trying to run a large trial is, are there enough patients who are willing to enroll in the trial to meet your needs in a timely way? So you have to marry the environment of enabling the trial and the volume of patients that you have. So we actually are also now about to start some trials in the United States. And so I can't really disclose yet because we're not under contract, but but we will be making letting people know about that sometime in during the next 2 months or so.
Okay, so from one Jewish cannabis business executive to another, what is it about this industry that attracts us? And you're in a country of 8 million Jews, and you're telling me that you can't find enough people to enroll in one of these trials?
So fair question. So what I think attracts us to the cannabis industry is its potential. Really, for the purpose of getting high, that's okay. I see it. It's a recreational product, and I'm in favor of it. But that's not what would have attracted me. What attracts me is the ability to provide a controlled high to those who want a controlled high. For example, I call them the reuser population, those who used it in their youth, but now they're in their late 60s, early 70s, are happy to go back to this, but they want to have a controlled high. They don't want to be out of control. 2, the potential medicinal applications, which are very exciting. And that's what attracts me to the complexity of the plant, the ability to mine out core data which can impact on people's lives, and the challenge that's involved from a regulatory perspective. I don't mind the challenge. That's what makes me energized.
Well, so as fun as it was to go down Lewis's rabbit hole, can we rewind a little bit? And can you just tell us about CanRx? What is it you guys do? Question mark.
Fair enough. So what we looked at, if you remember the background, we came from a company called Izun Pharmaceuticals, which specializes in botanical medicine. So our area of expertise is really taking botanical material with all the variability and all the inconsistencies that are there, understanding what makes this work, and how to design a process which will give you a clear dose, a clear effect, therapeutic, which you can use in healthcare needs. Because basically, a patient who takes a product for a healthcare need wants to feel better. So what we looked at the cannabis industry, and we basically said there are 3 major problems. Number 1, how do you pull out the bioactives from the cannabis plant? Number 2, and what's the most effective way to do that? Because without being able to do that, you're still stuck in smoking mode and an inconsistent product. 2, you need to be able to design the right cannabis formulation for the right indication. What helps you treat pain is not going to help you treat glaucoma or diabetes or many of the other diseases that are being studied now. And the third aspect is basically, how do we get this cannabis into your body in a precise way, in a measured dose? Because cannabinoids are notorious for being poorly absorbed. And the absorption is what's called variable, so that some days it may be absorbed rapidly if you've had a fatty meal, and some days it may be absorbed very poorly. So when you're dealing with a healthcare product or even a high recreational product, you want to know that you can design a consistent effect. So those were the 3 pillars that we said have to be changed in order to come out with effective cannabis-based products. So to delve into each one, briefly at least, we looked at cannabis and we said, first of all, we have 3,000 years of data of people extracting the cannabis bioactives by either smoking it, which is combustion, or vaporizing it, basically putting it on the fire and inhaling the smoke, which is basically, or putting it on the heating element and inhaling the smoke, which is vaporizing it. If you change the way you extract that product from the plant, you change the entire nature of the plant, and you've basically tossed out 3,000 years of empirical data and anecdotal data, which is very valuable. And so what we did was, some people ask me, what am I talking about? And basically I say, listen, if I gave you a cigarette and I said, soak it in alcohol and eat it, and it'll be like smoking, we all know it's not correct.
Ugh.
Yeah,
that's gross. That's great. Well, okay. I mean, cigarettes in general are gross, but yeah.
Okay, but now flip that story around and say, great, I'm going to give you a carrot. I'm going to say vaporize it. Are you getting a carrot? Not really. That's exactly what's happened in the industry. We needed to extract product. They had no technology to do it. So they grabbed onto existing food extraction technologies like CO2, like alcohol, like butane and propane. And these were designed not for cannabis. These were designed for food. So we did was we created a new system. We call it vapor capture technology, which is very simple conceptually. We basically vaporize at precise thermal temperatures. And we basically create a very controlled plume of all the bioactives, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and the unidentified elements that you would get if you vaporize this material. We put it through specific solubilization chambers, and we end up with a pure oil, no excipients, no solvents, it's a solvent-free extraction. And it's exactly the material that you'd get if you smoked or vaporizing it without all the harmful potential constituents that would come out from that process. We clean those out. On top of that, one of the nice parts about the technology is it actually cleans out the pesticides. It leaves the pesticides in the biomass. And we know that in agricultural products, pesticides always get in somehow or another in certain batches. And they're terrible for you from a health perspective. So we actually clean them out. You can actually, as far as we're concerned, grow with pesticides. We can leave them in the biomass and give you a pesticide-free extract. And the other piece that's nice about it is we actually have if you have mold or mildew, we actually remediate that completely. So not only do we get rid of the mold and mildew, but we get rid of all the aflatoxins, which are the untreated toxins which get into your material from the mold and mildew, which is endemic in the cannabis growth. And is at this point, the government is starting to be aware that there are major problems associated with this, but we don't have that issue. We remediate that completely. So we get a cleaner and more precise oil, which we believe is the ideal therapeutic profile that you can pull out of the cannabis plant. So we're going to actually launch that this year. We actually have one unit here in Israel, actually two, and we're going to be siting another two in the United States during the next few months.
I have to imagine that's great news for cultivators who, let's say they had a bad crop. I mean, that allows them to recapture at least some of their investment if they know that this technology is available and they can strip out, some of the mold or, anything that's kind of crept in there.
And I would assume a lot of requests from local growers for that purpose.
And I would assume that this is applicable not just to the THC side of this, but for CBD, which is taking off like a rocket ship.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's correct. And actually that sort of goes into the next aspect of it. It's like you said, CBD has been great for epilepsy, right? And it's actually well proven now. I mean, Charlotte Webb's and I think the Figge brothers really made a breakthrough from an anecdotal perspective, but the proof of the pudding came from GW Pharma when they ran a major trial and proved that they were correct all along. So CBD is a great product. I don't know where else it's going to go. Let's all agree on the fact that the claims are slightly inflated nowadays, but there's a great potential behind the product. It hasn't been
slightly inflated. It's it's snake oil.
Fair enough.
Right? This cures cancer. This will cure foot fungus. It's like. Come on.
I was trying to be politically correct.
You definitely have not listened to our podcast before. That's about as far away from who, at least I am, as possible.
Okay. So I'll try to morph into your mode.
Oh, please don't. That's okay. I can only handle one at a time.
Yeah, you be you, I'll be me, and we'll all be happy with that division of labor. But so what you were describing was your vapor capture technology, and it also seems that especially for the cannabis companies up north, the Canopy Growths of the world, that they are so focused on drinks. Like they have all made these huge bets that people are going to want to drink cannabis, and you guys are working on water soluble. I can say this: water soluble, bioavailable solutions. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So basically, one of the arms that we looked at was how do we get cannabis into the body in an efficient way? And what we want to do is learn from nature. So when you take a food into your body, it gets absorbed into your blood system, and it doesn't just float around. The nutrients don't just float around in your blood. They actually get picked up in a very efficient way. It's absolutely like a mass transport system where the proteins pick up the molecules, transport them around the body, and deliver them to where they're supposed to go. And when there's toxic elements that get released into the bloodstream, they actually pick those up on the way out and drop them off in the liver and other areas to be detoxified. So we basically mimicked what they call the protein transporter system in the body. So we take proteins, and a protein is basically like a rubber band rubbed between your hands and wrapped up, and it has a very convoluted shape. And there are little pockets between the parts of the protein. So we actually have a technology where we can pack the cannabinoids and the terpenes into these pockets, and basically when it creates a water solubility because it's a nanotechnology, so that the particle size is very small, and the proteins are water soluble. It doesn't change the cannabinoids at all, because that you can't do, because that's the drug element. You don't want to touch that. You want to keep that in its pure form. And what it does is actually, when you take the cannabis product orally, we're getting it into your body in 15 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half for a normal oral delivery.
And it doesn't change the flavor of the drink or whatever.
It actually mitigates it. It actually takes some of the bitterness. CBD has a bitterness, and so does THC. And actually, this torques down that bitterness significantly. So it's much milder, much less aftertaste.
You know, there are a lot of people who are betting big on drinks, right? And if you look at the data on consumption amongst consumers, you know, there's flower, there's vaping. Those are the top, 1 and 2. There's tinctures, there's edibles. Drinks are like so far down. Do you believe that there is a legit significant market for drinks, or is this, is this because a lot of the big companies who have invested in this space are alcohol companies, and they're saying, people are used to drinking a beer and drinking a glass of wine, and now they're going to want to drink their cannabis?
It's interesting. I'll tell you the truth.
No. Please lie. I want you to lie to me.
Thank you. I am actually not a big believer in the beverage industry. Frankly, I think people who are taking cannabis don't feel like taking it by a drink. If you want to get high, get high. You can take a capsule, you can take it, but drinking is a pleasure. Drinking alcohol, drinking a good scotch, a great wine, a great beer, those are fun. Drinking cannabis is not fun. So, it's just, I don't see it as a mix, personally, but I can't argue that the industry is growing. I don't know how long it's going to last.
You were just talking a little bit about the kind of the structure of how these proteins work, and I think I read somewhere that you basically see it as like a fisherman's vest that just picks up, the
between the top.
That's true. I have said that.
I think it's a great analogy. But can you talk about how that, you said earlier in this conversation that very little of cannabis in general gets absorbed. So does this help with the absorption process, or?
Yeah.
Normally, if you take a cannabis product if you ingest a cannabis product, if you take a gummy, or if you take a beverage, for example, it takes about an hour and a half to get in, and maybe a little less with a beverage. But actually, you only get about 10 to 15% of the cannabinoids into your body. Our process will increase that over 50%. So that's a 5-fold increase, which is an enormous powered product. And the other part is that it actually will stay in your body for a controlled amount. We can have it in there for an hour. We can have it in there for 8 hours. We can control that process.
So, Bill, does that mean if you're taking, for argument's sake, a 10 milligram gummy, you're really only getting 1 milligram of bioavailable THC and CBD, and that what you're doing is you would actually, if a gummy manufacturer was using your technology, you'd get all 10 milligrams?
No, we'd get about 5 to 6 as opposed to 1.
But seriously, like if you're eating a 10 milligram gummy, you're literally only getting 1 milligram of the active ingredients.
1 to 1.5. Yeah.
So, Washington State recently, there was a bill put into the Washington State legislature to limit the amount of THC in edible and vaping products, and capping it at 10%. Your technology would enable a lot of these companies to still have a product that has, some oomph to it, because, if you are a patient used to consuming something, that's 50 milligrams, and in essence, you're only getting 5, if they used your technology, they could give you a 10 milligram gummy, and you'd still get between 5 and 6 6 milligrams of active ingredient. Am I thinking that through right?
Absolutely correct.
So, okay. That's absolutely fascinating. So why is that not more widely known about the limits on what you're actually consuming or getting or getting access to? Because all of these big edible manufacturers, not that they're that big, they tout the amount of THC in their product, but do they know that the actual bioavailability is significantly less?
They should. It's publicly available and it's been known for 30 years. This is not new. Remember, THC has gone through a drug approval process. CBD is actually not the first cannabinoid approved. THC is. It's in the 80s, 1980s. And it was approved for specific indications to support cancer patients. So all those products went through extremely rigorous testing of exactly how much gets into the body. So this is not hearsay. This is hard facts. The average dose that's getting in is around 10%, up between 10 and 15%. This is well known. And the CBD is the same, which is why they have to give massive doses in order to get a therapeutic effect.
This is really fascinating. And I'm stealing the next question. So you guys are not a consumer. CannRx is not a consumer-facing company, right? You're much more of a B2B. So who are your potential or current customers or clients, and how are you communicating to them other than through public relations? Full disclosure, you guys are a KCSA client. So other than the earned media, how are you educating the industry as to what you guys are doing?
So we've been doing this research now for about 5 years. And, somebody once said to me, I'm an anomaly in the cannabis industry because I first research, then I speak, as opposed to speaking first and then figuring out if what I said made sense. So so we were pretty much in a stealth mode, which is not a compliment or a criticism. It's just the way we function. We wanted to make sure our data was strong and our data was good. And now I think in 2020, we feel very comfortable about our data package and the products that we offer. And we are sort of ready to say, okay, now let's engage the right companies and the right partners, because that's critical in every industry, and particularly in this industry, to bring our products to market in an efficient way. So we're getting a lot of interest, more interest than we can handle, and we're just looking for the right partners to do that in.
We have talked a lot about this show on the show, and we are, we have a lot of investors listening. Putting on your business hat and your entrepreneurial hat, the cash crunch in this industry has just, been so widespread. How are you guys navigating these choppy, capital markets waters?
So interestingly enough, we're not that affected by it at this stage, simply because we're not a consumer-facing company. We're a technology company. So our costs are all focused into R&D. So they're relatively reasonable. And we will then provide a product to a company who's already selling product to make his own products better. So he knows what he's getting and he can quantify the benefits that he'll get from this. In other words, if I'm making this much product and now I'm going to get a premium product, what's my markup? What's my differentiation? What's my marketing strategy? And we're getting a very warm welcome in the industry that our technology will bring those benefits to their consumer base, and that can be translated into a clear, objective business quantification. So we're not that affected by it. We also have our technology is really pretty much standalone, and we really targeted very interesting areas. But I hadn't gotten into the formulation, but we're looking at sleep and pain, and our data is seriously off the charts. In sleep, for example, and I think I'm just sharing this with you because I think it's interesting, and I think you'll appreciate it. If you think about what the problem with sleep disorders are, we all have friends. They either can't fall asleep. They go to sleep, but they wake up after a few hours and they spend the rest of their night staring at the walls, or they sleep for a long enough time, but it's not a restful sleep, so they're constantly tired. So they're suffering from a limited wakefulness during the day. But cannabis is a lot of different active molecules. So what we can do actually by using the active molecules that are in there and sort of upregulating and downregulating them, we actually were able to modify all aspects of that. But not only that, we know exactly which molecules are doing what. So we can control and we know which molecules do this, your onset of sleep. We can control the amount of time that you sleep, and we can control how restful your sleep will be.
So wait,
Where-
you can get
yeah.
people into theta sleep quickly?
Say it again.
So you're telling you I think what you're saying is that you can help people get into a theta band of sleep, right? Where the brain is refreshing, because ultimately the value of sleep is, it lets the brain clean out some of the amyloids that build up, and theta sleep and REM sleep are really where the good work happens. Am I wrong about that? Am I misunderstanding?
No, you're right about that, but there's two different ways to measure that parameter. So just for the sake of pure correctness, that's a radio technology that you basically attach electrodes to the animal's head or to the human head. It's non-invasive, but we actually measure it by actually a wakefulness. In other words, and that's the classic pharma model. How often are these subjects or mice or humans waking up during their sleep or stirring during their sleep? And that's how we measure it.
Okay, and is this? Are you going to license this? Are you going to build your own brand?
Yes.
Okay. Well, because I didn't know if you're going to build your own consumer brand, or
no, we're not going to build our own facility, but we're going to build our own brand. We want our licensing companies to utilize that brand.
Do you have a brand name yet?
No, we do, but we're not sharing yet because we haven't trademarked it yet.
Okay.
But open to new suggestions if you have any.
Well, this fits with what I was thinking for my next question, because Israel has always been a great place for VCs to invest. It's been such a great haven for the creation of technological and medical breakthroughs. But, for the most part, Israel as a country and Israeli companies have done a mediocre job at best at creating consumer-facing brands. I can only think of really one company that created a consumer brand that actually two. There's SodaStream and then Teva, right? Other than that, I can't think of an Israeli brand that has become part of the global consciousness. Why is it that you guys are so good at making such amazing, groundbreaking stuff, but seem to have such a hard time selling it?
It's a great question. It's really a great question. I think it's like, the unanswerable question. I don't know, but maybe it's an attitude like we think we're good at everything, and maybe that's the critical flaw. So,
yeah, maybe it's just, it's true though.
It's true. We suck at marketing. It's true. I say it about myself.
So we'll help you with the names for these products, and we'll market the hell out of them for you.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
So if we could flip to the U.S. for a moment, as we hopefully get closer to cannabis federal legalization here in the U.S., should cannabis companies continue to approach medical cannabis products similar to how the FDA approaches developing pharmaceutical drugs, or is there a better way?
So it's an interesting question, because a lot of people are talking about descheduling cannabis as opposed to rescheduling cannabis, and it's a major, major difference. If they reschedule cannabis, that means they will down-regulate. In other words, they'll take it from a Schedule 1 down to, let's say, a 2 or a 3 or some combination, depending on the levels of THC. That's going to transform the cannabis industry as they know it, because all of a sudden it's federally legal, which is be careful what you wish for. Most of the companies that are out there will not qualify. Their GMP levels are not sufficient. They're not even close. Their quality control systems are inefficient. They have no idea what they're asking for. So if the federal government reschedules cannabis, the industry will change radically, and most of the companies that you now know about will be gone. A whole new range of companies will come in, mostly pharma and large-scale companies, which may be good for the industry and may be bad for the industry. It's hard to tell.
Well, it'll be good for it from a pharmaceutical perspective, right? The question is,
it'll also be good for the consumer, because he'll get safer, cleaner products.
So can you talk about how you guys work with testing, right? Because everything you have described is making cannabis more bioavailable, safer, cleaner, more efficacious. Are the testing labs ready to work with you, or how will that work?
So it's interesting because when we originally approached the Israeli government for a license to do research in cannabis, they asked us to do them a favor. They asked us to set up a high quality and an analytical laboratory which would fit international criteria. And in exchange for that, they would also give us a license. It was sort of a quid pro quo. And
we're very familiar with that term here.
So
there was no quid pro pro. It was a perfect call. It was a perfect call.
So anyway, the point was that we set up what's called an ISO 17025 laboratory, which meets very high standards. And until very recently, and we may still be the only lab that does that. So we know what it's like to be an analytical lab. So the labs basically are very comfortable working with us simply because we are a lab. We do the government analysis here in Israel, and they basically only use us for that process. And at the same time, we have a great interface with other labs because we speak their language. So there's no problem on that end. It's just the way the industry grew.
Let's go back to snake oil for a second. Because CBD generally is being attributed these miraculous qualities, and most consumers, especially new consumers to whether it be straight up cannabis or CBD, don't understand the difference between CBD, CBN, CBG, terpenes, all that stuff. Can you give just a CBD for dummies explanation about how this stuff works?
So basically, there's about 140, now about 150 different cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. And the main ones, meaning in terms of the amount of molecular material that's in the cannabis plant, are THC and CBD, which is why everybody's looking at those, because you can see them very clearly in the molecular analysis. CBD is not psychoactive. It has a lot of therapeutic benefits in vitro testing, and it clearly has some in clinical testing as well. For example, epilepsy. Some people tout it for reduction of inflammation and for pain. Great preclinical data, very limited clinical data, which is really the parameter of is it working. THC is highly psychoactive, and but on the other hand, it's non-addictive. And the lethal dose of THC is basically off the charts in a positive way. In other words, you can't really kill yourself with THC, which is very unusual for a psychoactive. So it has a lot of benefits there for use in a lot of different conditions, let's say, for the human body, whether it's PTSD or whether it's psychological counseling or whatever it is. It can be used to modify brain function and without toxicity. So it's just a matter of, choosing your weapon and figuring out how to work with it.
So is it a little unfair that Lewis has called it snake oil when there are so many, positive attributes? Well, no, I'm just saying I don't want to be part of a problem that, the way we talk about it, I want us to be careful. Like it's not curing cancer, but if it's, helping someone with epilepsy or helping someone with nausea or whatever I just want to be careful with the language.
But those disease states have been tested, right? I mean, GW Pharma did tens of millions of dollars of testing to get Epidemis to market to prove it works again, in treating tremors associated with epilepsy. It's hard. People are ascribing qualities to this stuff without the clinical data, without the double-blind trials. They're just saying, I have a friend who. That's not enough, and that worries me.
I'll tell you, yes, it has some positive attributes, but they're way overclaiming. And there are some toxicity issues with CBD in very large doses, although I can't imagine people are taking them in those doses. But that's the doses that they gave at Epidiolex. There were some liver toxicity issues there, which are frightening, actually. So that's what concerns the FDA. But remember, there's another federal organization which is monitoring this situation very carefully, the Federal Trade Commission. Okay, you can't make false marketing claims. So there's no question they're watching, but they're trying to figure out how to deal with a state-based regulatory environment.
Look, Curaleaf had its products taken off the shelves, I think at CVS, because claims. So
remember, they went federal in their marketing. That's
yes.
That's why they were targeted. It's hard for them to target someone who stays within the state. It's funny because we're not really aware of it because we think of ourselves as the United States, but we forget what it means. It really is a united group of states. But so we think of the federal government as our government, but the reality is our governments are the state-based governments, and the federal government sits as an umbrella organization above that. So as long as the state is staying within state lines, they have an enormous amount of freedom.
So let's go back to vaping. I think that's been, one of the big topics, especially, in 2019, and it seems to have died down a little bit. Some of the health concerns, at least in the mainstream media. But you guys are coming up with solutions that are very based on inhalation technology, and so how are you thinking of next steps? In both communicating to the public that this is safe, or are there, I guess that's my question is how are you going to communicate this, and how much is the vaping crisis, how much pushback are you finding from any of your clients?
It's a very interesting question, but I'll sort of answer, you asked like let's be Jewish. I'll answer a question with a question.
Why would you do that?
I get it.
Why would you do this?
So I'll give you how many, when people smoke a cannabis joint, they'll generally go out, smoke the joint, and come back. People who vape are vaping all day long. They just have that vape right in their pocket. They pull it out, and every 15 minutes they're taking another vape. It's like the action of vaping is so clean, it's almost the action itself is addictive. Same thing with e-cigs, by the way. And so but I think that's part of the problem of vaping is they're constantly exposing their lungs as opposed to a brief period of, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 joints during the 24-hour period. They're vaping every 15 minutes. So they're hitting their lungs with that stuff 4 times a day. And what the Center for Disease Control basically said is they believe it's the vitamin E acetate that's in these solutions. But there's glycerol in these vaping solutions. There's propylene glycol in these vaping solutions. Dumping that into your lungs every 15 minutes is not healthy. So what we actually did and this was our contribution to this. If you think about what I told you earlier about the vapor capture technology process, it works by heating, right? So let's say I set my dial and my technology for extraction at 180 degrees. Everything that came out of the plant is volatile at 180 degrees, right? Whereas if I did it in a solvent-based, I have no control over the temperature range, what molecules are in there. They could be at 230, 240, or 100. So by doing that, I can actually create for you a pure disc of cannabis oil that you turn your vape onto 180, everything will volatilize. So I can give you a pure cannabis oil, no excipients to vape with. You still shouldn't vape every 15 minutes, but it's the cleanest vape that's available.
And it's more bioavailable, and you have to take less to get the same effect. It's all of the stuff that we've already talked about.
Yes.
We've been talking now for about 45 minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to ask a question that, speaks to the heart of entrepreneurship, because that's, you are an entrepreneur by nature, and have been successful. And I believe, and anybody who's listened to any of our shows over the last year or so, that I truly believe that success is the child of failure. That, you can step in success and not know how you got there, but if you are intentionally successful, it is because of the experiences that you've had based on the failures that you've had. Can you talk about a failure you've had that's shaped you, whether it be from a business perspective, a personal perspective, but some painful lesson that you learned that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, yes, I'll be happy to, and I will. I used to lecture a lot in the professional area in educating dentists on how to be better dentists, and I had a slide, and the slide said, "Good judgment comes from experience," and the next slide said, "Experience comes from bad judgment." Okay, because that's absolutely true. So I mean, there are many things. I'm very good and very dogged, and maybe pugnacious in a sense in solving problems. And so I generally don't let failure push me down. But sometimes a hard no is much better than a maybe. So we have had clinical trials where we were positive we were going to be successful. The data broke exactly as we intended it to. And then when we looked at the data, I just remember sitting there holding my head in my hands and saying, this can't be. This simply can't be. This is not what we expected. But you look at what the data shows, and if it's a no, you put it to the side and move on, because what's reflected in the clinical trial, the data is data. And you can analyze it all you want, but if it proves to be no, it's no. So I think the message would be a failure is just like you said, it's a stepping stone. You'll either learn from it, you'll either drop a product that shouldn't have been developed to start with, or you'll give up, which a lot of people do. And I really do understand them.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. So last question. We've talked about there's been so much misinformation, picked up by the media, and often forgotten information. I mean, I think early on in this conversation, both Louis and I were, we were expressing surprise at some of the stuff you're talking about, and you're like, guys, this is 30 years old. So what do you think the media is missing? Like, what's the story that you want to get up, and read tomorrow in the Jerusalem Post or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal?
I think that if you look at the industry, it's evolving. And I gave a lecture actually at a cannabis conference where I called it the evolution of the revolution. The revolution took place. The train has left the station. The major change took place over the last decade where cannabis became accepted mainstream professionally, as well as consumers, as well as the population. So this is a massive change. I mean, let's just step back for a second and see what happened. Now it's the industry's responsibility and the public's responsibility to demand better products and to produce better products. So the story that I really want to see is we're committed to excellence in this field, because if we're not committed to excellence, this field will just sort of wither on the vine, because it's just going to go back to the way it was. It'll just be legal highs. But if we're committed to excellence, this could be a groundbreaking change, bigger than bringing tobacco into the industry, into the new world.
Well said. So thank you, Dr. Levine, Bill. That was excellent. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and it sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Our thanks to Dr. Bill Levine, founder and chief science officer at CanRx. As always, thank you all for listening. We know that your time is valuable, and how you choose to spend it and spending it with us is something that we never, ever take for granted. If you want to chat with us, you can find us on Twitter with the handle @the_greenrush or on Instagram @the_greenrush_podcast. Drop us an email at greenrush@kcsa.com. We're always looking for your feedback, for guest ideas, comments on my really bad dad jokes, whatever. Please don't forget to subscribe to The Green Rush in your favorite podcatcher. And that's one take, Shay. One take.
Cannabis.